Welcome to the Chief Future Officer podcast. My name is Indus Khaitan. Today, my guest is Ashwath Bhat. Ashwath is a CFO at Fractal. Ashwath, great having you today.
Thanks so much, Indus. Again, pleasure talking to you.
Ashwath, you have an interesting background, long career, more than 2 decades. And I saw the amazing work that Fractal is doing. I'm curious if you could talk about what's Fractal doing and how has the business been the last couple of years?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. No, we've been lucky at Fractal. What Fractal is into is mainly into AI and analytics. And we mainly serve the Fortune 500 companies across US and Europe and Australia. We have offices in around 17 countries. Right now, we are more than 4,400 employees. When I just joined 2.5 years back, our employee strength was 2,000 people. So I think that's maybe a very good way of measuring or how quickly we are kind of growing in this over the last, 30 months. And again, talking about AI and analytics, AI has been the buzzword in the last maybe 6 months now after ChatGPT. But it is something that Fractal has been doing. When I say Fractal is doing AI, it's mainly helping some of the big companies to use the power of AI to achieve their end objectives of obviously selling more and being more profitable and understanding their own customers or their clients much better than what they do right now. So it's all about writing algorithms so that taking software to the next level and making them more efficient and growing them much faster.
Wonderful. So when you started probably 2.5 years ago at Fractal, AI was, part of the overall tech ecosystem. Now, how do you feel when AI has become the ecosystem in the last 6 months?
Yeah, I think it's definitely exciting. I think it's exciting times for us, whether you're a finance professional or rather an engineer. I think it's definitely very much exciting times. I think it is at times, it's definitely both a big tailwind and a headwind too, in the sense like a huge tailwind, definitely in the medium term and maybe even 10 years. But how exactly it will kind of, the future of work over the next 10 years, I guess it's very difficult to predict. But right now, I think there is a lot to be done. I think I had been to my village in the Western Ghats in India a month back. And I think I was there for almost 10 days and I didn't even hear once anybody talking about ChatGPT. So I think that's where I would say that even the optimism comes from. I think right now, if you live in the Bay Area or maybe in Mumbai or Bangalore, all you hear is all about ChatGPT. So kind of it talks about the ability for us to kind of scale it from, say, a Bay Area to some small remote village in Western Ghats, because I'm sure it will reach there, but it might take a while. And so there's a lot of opportunity more than what people might immediately look at it as a threat.
Interesting. So you mentioned Western Ghats in India. So I'm assuming you grew up in India and then moved to the United States somewhere. How has been that transition? If you could talk more about your early days in India.
Sure. I'll be brief. But in the sense, I've moved my house almost 23 times in my life. So I think I've moved around quite a few times. So I grew up in a very small village in the Western Ghats in India. And when I say a small village, like village with 20, 25 people. So generally, a lot of times people think village as like at least 1,000 people. So really remote, no real connection to the outside world. So I then went to the smaller town nearby, and then for my chartered accountancy, I moved to Bangalore. So obviously not a small place. I did my internship with IBM, our third year of my CA. And then I was actually recruited by GE in the GE's finance leadership program in Bangalore. And it was out of a CA campus. I think it was almost 23 years back now. It was the first time CA Institute ever did a campus hiring for the freshly qualified CAs. So I learned more or less all my basics and a lot of fundamentals of finance and other leadership things in G through the G's finance leadership program. I spent almost 7.5, 8 years with G. It was also a joint venture with Wipro. So I got a lot of exposure to Wipro along with G and G Healthcare. And then I joined IBM again back in India, based out of Bangalore, for another 3.5 years. And then I joined Nielsen in 2010 in Dubai. So that was basically first time I really moved out along with family from India to Dubai. In Dubai, I used to manage Middle East and Africa. So countries starting from Morocco to Pakistan to South Africa to Kenya to Ghana and Israel. So a lot of interesting countries with very, very diverse culture and background, and again, obviously, very diverse team. So I spent 5 years in the Middle East and Africa region as the CFO for Nielsen for that again region, and then I moved to Nielsen headquarters based out of Connecticut in the US. That was in 2015. So and I was in Connecticut for 2 years and then moved to the Bay Area because Nielsen bought a company called Gracenote, which is like world's number one metadata company, all video and audio metadata company. So that's how I moved to Bay Area 6 years back. And I was with Nielsen till 2020 end. And early 2021, I left Nielsen and joined Fractal as CFO. So yeah, it's been exciting 23, 24 years now.
That's quite a journey. I do remember Gracenote. It's called Gracenote DB or Gracenote database, like all the songs and artist metadata used by many of the media players, to build that profile that you see on your players, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And like yeah, Gracenote, like in fact, enabled. It used to be owned by Sony a while back, and it enabled the first iPod. And then like instead of
Correct.
seeing something as track 1, 2, 3, it can now say, okay, here's the name of the song, the artist, and the singer, and the lyricist, and maybe a cover photo and all that stuff. That's how Gracenote started. So yeah.
And I'm very curious now about Gracenote. So, is it even today when I launch my Apple Music, the track names, the artists are supplied by Gracenote?
That's right. Yeah. So for again, it's still the world's largest metadata database for again mainly for video and then audio. So even now, like in almost 120 million cars, I think the Gracenote software sits. So if you're on your car
Wow.
and basically kind of playing any song, the reason you get again the exact name and the cover art, etc., is most of the times it's likely to be a Gracenote software. And then for most of the electronic program guides, EPG for again, if you're watching cable TV, except maybe Netflix, yeah, the cover art and other things are provided by Gracenote. So like, yeah, and also like depending on psychographics, different cover art that you see based on a lot of times based on your background, people tend to see different, say, posters. That's mainly also driven by Gracenote technology. So, yeah, if you're watching, say, something on Amazon Prime or any of the streaming companies, except few, the whole metadata behind the video content is provided by Gracenote.
Wow. That's a good piece of trivia to make my day. That's amazing. So I'm just reflecting on your journey. So 23 years, from India, now living in the Bay Area, and then, the amazing work that Fractal is doing. When you started at Fractal 2 years ago, and now this whole era of Chat GPT that's driving up the craziness. If you could talk a little bit more about it based on your vantage point, is this real? Is this sustainable? Are we going to see the promise of AI plus the nervousness around AGI? Is that going to happen?
Yeah, I think difficult to always kind of predict the future at times. I'm sure we all heard the case studies about like when the ATM came into the banking industry, people thought that all the teller jobs will go away, obviously, and then how the bank employment will shrink. But I think over a period of time, all of us know the number of bank employees is much higher than ever, and despite having so many ATMs. But also, there's another example which gets quoted, which is like if you were to be a horse, thinking about what will happen to, okay, initially there was more steam engine, and nothing, okay, it's steam engine, so nothing will happen to their job as like carriage. Then you have internal combustion engine, which kind of obviously change the jobs for a lot of horses. So there's always kind of this debate as to whether this time is it going to kind of take away a lot of the jobs. But as our founder Shrikant keeps talking about, I think AI is real, and I think the people who are going to succeed are the ones who can use AI successfully to kind of drive their own companies. So I think I would say there is nothing to be kind of obviously, definitely in the medium term to be worried. I think there's a lot of use cases where AI can be very, very, very helpful. Yes, if you're a tech company, I think some of the use cases would be maybe done much better by AI. But say if you're a large, very large CPG company, again, not to name any of them, I think the chat GPT itself is not going to change much of the jobs for a lot of people. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, like if you have a HR policy or a finance related policy, if you kind of obviously feed it to any LLM, then employee can just say do a query and get the answer without having to go to anybody in say finance and HR. That would be a very simple use case. But the real interest of, okay, if I come with this new product introduction, what could be the sales? So like revenue growth management, or again supply chain management, so which needs to be deployed at an enterprise scale. How do you use again some of the LLMs for that, or not just LLMs, I mean AI for that? I think that will continue to be a challenge, because implementing AI at a enterprise uh, for a complete enterprise is going to be very different from say a conversational AI. So if you are into just conversational AI, yeah, we will a lot of this SaaS based LLMs kind of reduce your chances in the market. Yeah, definitely yes. It's going to be much easier if that's the only thing that you do. But if you're a large, again, CPG company, tech company, insurance company, I think you will still need somebody to kind of implement that AI systems within your company, and again, ultimately drive more profitability and more growth. So,
And as a CFO, do you think Chat GPT or Bloomberg GPT, or is there a finance equivalent of a GPT that is gonna, or that poses a threat to accounting and bookkeeping and strategic or tactical finance functions? Do you see that happening for finance as well?
yeah, I think will there be more productivity and more efficiency that will be driven by all the be it Excel, GPT, etc.? The answer is yes. But one thing that at least I've observed over a period of time, and including every ERP company will tell you how they will do the intelligence automation, which is nothing but again using a lot more AI into their solution. I do see a lot of times everybody wants to talk about obviously the decision making, business partnering, driving productivity actions that you will kind of take, but lot less time is still spent on ensuring that your basic data quality is kind of clean. Somebody still needs to do a good amount of accounting. Yes, can you automate it? Can you automate invoicing? Can you automate like collection process and auto like application of cash? Yeah, you can do a lot of that using AI or any other automation. But ensuring that you still have a good database, which is kind of data, which is managed by a bunch of accountants, which is clean and which has like kind of both debit and credit match. It sounds very basic but the basic things generally are the ones that get ignored. And whenever I've seen people kind of going to jail because of say some financial shenanigans, a lot of times it's not because of some high-end analytics did not work. A lot of times it's because the basic accounting was not done correctly. So I think, will there be need for finance professionals, accounting professionals who understand, again, accounting standard, who can interpret it, will always be there. But will they be helped by, like, right now, uh, I wanted to get some understanding of some tax related query. I just went to ChatGPT to kind of get some answers. But at the same time, if I'm having some very complicated questions around, say, my ESOP program, obviously I'm likely to go back to somebody in one of the big fours and get a little bit more help. I think so. It will make a lot of us very, very efficient. So something where you needed 20 people, maybe you need 10 people. But those 10 people who are augmented by AI are the ones who are going to kind of succeed in the future.
So it would change quite a bit the role of finance the next, I would say, 2 to 5 years. A lot of automation coming in, assistance coming in from, simple natural language query giving you a response. Did you see any such transition in your career in the last 15 years where what you do now has dramatically changed compared to what you did 10, 15 years ago?
I think this time the change is pretty much real. I think it's much more real than at least what I've seen over the last, again, 23 years. So, like, I'm maybe just when I had started, this was in 98, Excel was still pretty much new. So I do think a basic thing like a spreadsheet was a big change for a lot of people in finance. I think a lot of times Excel gets a bad name, saying that, okay, though this was an Excel error. But I very firmly believe if you understand business, Excel can be a great tool for any finance professional or any professional to kind of make their life much more simpler. So I think post, getting a spreadsheet and then having much better ERPs, I think this is definitely a huge change. Like, I think a lot of these things have started happening. Like, even some of the expense claim tools that everybody has, right? Again, not taking any specific names, like be it like, again, Concur from SAP or Brex, or there are so many of them. Yeah, did a lot of them help us automate? Okay, you can scan a receipt instead of like, and that it will read the receipt and say, okay, here is the amount that you need to claim. So lot of this progress has been happening for a while. So I think, will it get even more automated? I think the answer is yes. Can we get to a scenario where AI can definitely read a contract and do revenue recognition as per revenue recognition guidelines, which I don't think we could do before? I'm sure we can do those things going forward. So would you need to kind of go back to a RevRec expert and kind of specifically interpret the contract and say what's whether it kind of matches all the criteria? I don't think you need to do that, or rather, that's a huge change, because earlier it was a little bit more like that language had to be in a specific way, but now I don't think. I think LLMs have kind of solved that problem quite well.
God, it's pretty interesting. The thing that you mentioned, 97, 98 days, Microsoft Excel was almost coming out to the party, and a lot of automation, or at least software, helped finance professionals get their job done. And now software stack is completely changing. Have you seen this transition where, so you're still using Microsoft Excel, what you are using, that tool remains. Are other tools that you used in your early days still the same, or you see a change, or you have seen a change?
No, we've definitely seen a lot of changes. I think we have more tools. I still think, like in my earlier company, we had it's even mind-boggling to me when I say it. It's more than 200 different systems which kind of were used by big finance, business heads, HR, operations, everybody put together. It was more than 200 different systems. So like, I think we have a lot more tools than what we had before. So, but at the same time, we still do, I see it's still getting kind of even more like we have earlier we used to have one streaming service. Now we have like all of us, instead of cable we have like maybe 10 different streaming service. So I think same thing happening in finance, right? Something for expense accounting, something for CRM, core CRM, something for time tracking, something for managing your depreciation and amortization. There it's kind of getting a little bit more kind of fragmented than what I would like. So I am still struggling to kind of find one tool which kind of takes everything. So ultimately every company has only two process in my head. Like you have inquiry to order and order to cash, right? So you get an inquiry, you send a quotation, you get a purchase order if you win the deal, and then you ultimately invoice and then you collect. So but for doing this particular activity of getting a client interest till you collect cash, now I think even in my company I will easily be having at least 15 different tools. So how do you kind of move all of that into one tool? Like, yeah, we can kind of APIs, etc. You can kind of get a lot of data together, create one nice dashboard. All that is pretty much possible, but it is still different tools. So, and unless they are integrated well, yeah, you still kind of it's like somebody who has a lot of tools but don't know like even a lot of them are not even used in most of the companies. So yeah.
Interesting. And we'll come back to this if time permits. But I want to go back to a couple of things that you mentioned. Starting in very early and small town in India, now CFO of of a leading AI company. Would you have done things differently compared to what you have done in the last 20 years?
Yeah, I would say more or less no. But at the same time, if 23 years back or even 30 years back, if somebody had asked me, like, will I be even living in the US or or be a CFO, that definitely the answer is no. I wouldn't have thought. It's not, there was no grand plan or any kind of plan saying that, okay, I'll do A to B to C deal. So there's nothing like that. One thing that yeah, I would continue to do the same thing is like, yeah, if you kind of whatever job you have, kind of do it as well as you can. And I think most of the times success will kind of follow. And the only thing that I would say I would do a little bit differently is when I was, as I said, I started with G. I learned all my maybe the most important skills, both technical and leadership skills in G. And this was the G when like I started in 2000. So like till 2004 5, G was still the largest company in the world. Like people a lot of times forget that. And it was like the most admired company, most respected company. So it was definitely an academic company in the sense where you learned a lot of things. Maybe the only thing that I would do a little bit differently, I would still not call it a regret, is yeah, I left G because of a very small thing, in the sense like I was like, I thought I was still 29 or something, and like I thought I should be the CFO for the local company, and obviously I didn't have the experience or the whatever other skills that were required, but I thought I should be. And then when they said, okay, you have to wait for a while, I just quit. So yeah, like in the hindsight, obviously it was definitely not the smartest of the decision that I would say. Like, because one learning is, especially when you're doing well and in a good company, never quit.
That's a great word of wisdom. Did you have an influence from someone like a mentor or a guide or a coach in your career?
Yeah, no, definitely there are two people who have kind of mentored me, coached me. Though I've never called them maybe my mentor specifically, but they played that role a lot. One was his name is V Raja. He was the one who hired me into G. He was G India CFO at that point of time. Later, he went on to become CEO of G Healthcare in India, and then later he was also the head of Philips in India and Tyco in India. So he's retired now. He, again, as I said, he recruited me. He taught me a lot about integrity and walking the talk. Like obviously taught me a lot about finance, and like he would always have this saying which would say something like, it goes something like this, that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and uh, cash flow is reality. So it's like, yeah, revenues. So I think the cash is king. So I think the importance of cash generation versus a lot of times people getting kind of maybe at times misled with only chasing growth. So I think he taught me a lot about, again, importance of cash flow. And as I said, more importantly, other than the finance related skills, I think a lot about leadership, and especially for a finance person, integrity is important for everyone. And I do think finance person should be above reproach, like in the sense, need to be one more of a role model than everybody else. So taking that extra precaution and walking the talk, which becomes extremely important. So I think I learned a lot of other, I wouldn't even call them skills, but more foundational stuff for people to kind of succeed over a period of time. And the second one, his name is Shankar Annaswamy. So he was head of G Healthcare in early 2000. And then later he was also head of IBM in India. So he taught me a lot about, again, business, and again, how do you manage a client or a customer? How it's always like in Fractal, we have this saying, which he taught me a long time back, which the Fractal belief and the part of the culture is like client before the company, company before the team, and team before self. So I think the primacy of a client or a customer, I think Shankar taught a lot about that to me in terms of how do you manage them, how do you manage a client escalation, how do you kind of yeah, it's not always about short-term profitability and having a process. It's a lot about client satisfaction and long-term relationships. So I learned a lot from these two people, so who kind of gave me the opportunity to work in two great companies, and at the same time taught a lot.
Fantastic. You mentioned about growth, and where V Raja, your coach and your mentor, talked about, hey, it cannot be just growth at all costs. And we have seen what has happened in the last 5-6 years. It's zero interest rate phenomena and growth, growth, growth. And now there's a course correction going on. How do you see this impact? How long this macro change is going to last?
The choice between growth and profitability is a false choice. I think it is kind of both. I think there is a Chinese saying which, if you are given two choices, basically take both of them. It might sound a little hypocritical to say that, okay, yeah, both growth and profitability are equally important. I don't believe at a given point of time, maybe both of them are not equally important. There will be times where you over index a little bit more on say growth, and there will be times where it is a little bit more around profitability. So I do believe, especially when the markets are growing really, really fast, focusing on growth is very important so that you kind of don't seed the ground. And every other time, I think whether interest rates are zero or interest rates are at 10%, I think focusing on cash and profitability is equally important, because what people a lot of times forget is, like, the more profitable you are, more healthier you are as a company, that much better for every stakeholder. And when I talk about the stakeholder, it's about investors, it's about employees, it's about vendors. The more healthy the company is, much better for everyone it is going to be.
That's a great answer, and I think so, because it's never an equivalence choice. It has to be a good balance of both. So totally agree with you on that. As we wrap up our conversation, Aswath, couple of more questions. I just want to understand, your job as a CFO is pretty intense. On one side, you have to make sure that the high standards of finance are kept intact. Other side, you have expenses, you have revenue coming in, pressure from all teams. How do you maintain sanity? How do you remain intact as a person?
Yes, I think pressure is kind of pretty much part of the job. And I personally, what I do is I run a lot. I do maybe a couple of marathons in a year. So that's my kind of way of relaxing. So yeah, I think that's the time when my mind is free, and generally after every run, I feel that much better. So, but at the same time, I think the other thing that I would also say is I think making your company or your job your only identity can put a lot more pressure than I guess what's required. Yes, like your company is very important. Your job is very important. You should do it kind of to the best of your ability. But at the same time, if that's the only identity that you kind of have, because all of us have other identities in terms of for me, being a spouse or a husband. I'm a father, so I have so many other things. So I think just keeping maybe a good day at a job or bad day at a job the only thing as a measure of success is generally doesn't end well. So that would, at least that has been my learning.
Great. Do you read any recommendations of a book?
Yeah, I do read quite a bit, and a lot of times it's audiobooks, as you can imagine. With running it, it also kind of lets me do two things at a time. I can recommend some finance books like The Future of Finance by Professor Ishwar Prasad. I think talks a lot about how CBDCs and how the digital finance, how the future is likely to be. It also covers a little bit about the history. So it's a great read. I think Psychology of Money is another great by Morgan Housel. But at the same time, I really enjoy reading some of the historic books or other basically biographies of people like be it founding fathers of the US, be it like Alexander Hamilton to Washington to Benjamin Franklin. So because I find like a lot of times finance books tend to be maybe saying the same thing in different ways. So I'm not saying they're not important. They're very important to keep people updated. But I think some of the history books, that's where you kind of also realize that history, obviously, I wouldn't say it repeats, but definitely rhymes. I think I have found that I've learned a lot more from history than just say some of the finance books. So, but again, talking about finance and VC world, I think Barbarians at the Gate, it's not exactly VC, but it's a great book. It's a classic. So yeah, there are tons of books which one can read. Yeah.
Yeah, I've read that R.J.R. Nabisco's Fall from Grace, and that's amazing story, amazing maneuver, plotting, scheming, and all the shenanigans.
Yeah.
Ashwath, thank you for your time. Thanks for those book recommendations. If people want to find you on the internet, if they want to reach out to you, where they can look up to you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is maybe the best place to kind of look up to me. I'm last 3 days, I'm trying to get out of Twitter from Twitter addiction. I'm going through de-addiction. So yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashwath, for your time. My guest today is Ashwath Bhat. He is with Fractal, where he runs the CFO's office. Great having you.
Thanks so much, Indus. And again, all the best. And I think fabulous achievement so far, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Chief Future Officer Podcast. The Chief Future Officer Podcast is brought to you by Quolum, a CFO's best buddy to buy and manage SaaS. To support this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast application. Links to previous episodes and the rest of the show notes are in the bio, and I'd love to have you check out other episodes. Lastly, if you want to be on this podcast or recommend a friend, let us know in the comments below. Thank you.